Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production. Joined with my co-creator, co-commentator, co-caster, co-compatriot Rob
Hello.
on the bottom there, and we
Yeah.
have the Max deck tech here, the Spark
The
Test One. This
Max
is the
Spark Test.
this is the list that I played recently for the gameplay video, so I'm gonna
Mhm.
explain it a little bit on this iteration here. And I see this as probably the most stable build that I've played so far. But until there's like a proven like top eight or high
Right.
placing build in the current meta, this is kind of the build I'm going to be using as my base and
hmm
going from there.
And this
Max
list
is a
will
hero.
evolve a bit over time too. Like if you
Yes, yes,
find
yes,
new
yes,
new
yes.
tech or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I built this list specifically with current ProQuest kind of meta in mind. That means Lexi's still viable. So I
Right.
built this list. I built the list with that in consideration. Uh, Considering Lexi's still a thing, Dromide's probably going to be running around, and there's going to be like some other aggro decks like Katsu, possibly some Bravo, some more mid-rangey decks. So
hmm
I kind of had all of those considerations, and that'll come into play when you see the sideboard.
Yeah.
So for the main deck, you have Maxx as a more aggressive hero with Banksy. There's no other weapons. The once per turn action gives you the Hyper. You just
hmm
need to have boosted, and then you can crank and swing Banksy. The
Banksy.
other item in the deck, Boom Grenade. I do run a Boom Grenade. I'm considering upping it to two
One
Boom
copy.
Grenades. Yeah, well, it's one copy because like if once you play the one, you don't like your opponent doesn't really know how many you're running anyways.
Okay.
Um, but I like Boom Grenade as a zero cost. I guess we're getting right into this card, but let's I'll explain the Boom Grenade
Yep.
first.
Yep. That's fine.
So I did have the space for it. So I wasn't really struggling to get another spot in the main 60. It kind of just worked its way in there. Um, and I think the key is it's a zero cost crank that you are able to swing Banksy, swing Banksy after. So
hmm
you're able to just like Boom Grenade,
Play it.
yeah, play
Crank.
it, crank, pitch a blue, boost a card, and then swing Banksy as like a nice, two card. Well, it's a
Yep.
three
Plus the
card
pitch,
with
I
a boost
guess.
hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Banksy, and then you're able to if the attack action doesn't hit for Boom Grenade, but the Banksy does hit, you could put the counter back on Boom Grenade, right?
Okay. I see.
So
Yeah.
it's a bit of a looped feedback there, in that Banksy doesn't necessarily have to put something on hyperdrivers, anything that cranks, right?
Right. Right.
So that's kind of what you could do to keep it alive one more time. And Boom Grenade is also very good in the aggro matchups because it's a lot more likely to get through. And so if they want to no block,
hmm
then you just get a free 0 for 4, which is still very powerful because it enables you to hit with Banksy.
Yeah.
So you're able to use every resource because Teklo Foundry Heart, once you boost, every single turn will generate an extra resource to swing Banksy. So you're able to just to keep using your deck to cycle as much damage as possible to win the race, which is a key component of this deck here. So the boots, kind of the rest of the equipment here, the Achilles Accelerator, pretty self-explanatory, just
Yep.
AB, extra action point. I use it
Yep.
to go extra wide.
Yep.
Cogworth's base
Importantly,
arm.
I will just mention you cannot use it for Banksy twice because Banksy is a once per turn
No,
attack, right? So unlike the pistol, you can
Banksy
keep
is
swinging that.
correct. You can't. Yeah,
So you got to find a
don't
creative
try to
way to
do
use the
that.
extra action point for that.
Yeah, which I did do in our other game to close it
hmm
out. But like, it's still important to know um, what the workarounds are, right? Like you don't always want to be boosting a bunch of cards, and there's also other cards that you can use to extend the chain. So the Cogworth's base arm is mainly there because you're running Evo Facebreaker. I'm running one at the moment because I don't see it as
Yeah.
much of a deterrent at the moment. I'm considering two, but at the moment I'm going with one. This card is specifically good in aggro race mirror because first of all, you're not running in the main deck any hyperdrivers per se. However, you can create them pretty easily, and you end up having at least one, maybe two. And with the amount of crankshafts and big Berthas, you
hmm
keep them on the field for quite a while, right? And so the idea is that this card is fine off one hyperdriver, and it's very good off two hyperdrivers. Like the spike potential is quite high because if you have two hyperdrivers, this thing essentially is a 0 for 8, right? So you get to
hmm
equip, transform, and then transform X is 2 if you have two, and then the next time you bring prevent damage, twice that amount. So it's preventing
hmm
4 off two hyperdrivers. So you do
Right.
this on your opponent's turn, because this is an instant arms. So you do it on your opponent's turn and then prevent whatever that is for 4. 4 is a breakpoint pretty easily, like any of the 0-4s it could prevent, or any of like the ninja on hits. It prevents like gust wave unless they want to pop like arms or
The
something like that off
bracers.
combos.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. But it also has the +2 for whatever you boost and attack. So it's an
Mm-hmm.
ingrown pounder. And pounder is very good in the mirror. It's good for getting over breakpoints as also, but in the not in the mirror, sorry, in the aggro
In
mirror
the
is what I
aggro.
meant.
Yeah.
So yeah, so just that extra 4 damage you can get across multiple attacks could force breakpoints, force extra damage. And so if you get 2, that's kind of the magic number. But I think 1 is also okay because 1 makes this a 0 for 4.
Yep.
However, you do have to use a hyper driver, so it's not really a 0-4. It's more like
A
a
little
2 for
less.
4.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Max specifically, like assuming you did that with the hyper driver. So that's the idea between Evil Facebreaker, and then when you boost it, you don't really care. Like it's not like one of those core cards that you absolutely need, but still could be good in different kind of
Core
plays.
cards. Speaking of core cards.
Max velocity, yeah, it's definitely pretty strong in those
How
matches where you
crucial
just
is
have to go
this? Do you
max
really?
velocity.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, do you? I mean, you didn't really need it against the Lexi match. I will say, because you boosted, I
I
think, 2 away. Uh,
I I would have if you probably drew better because
if
you
I
didn't
shoot better.
draw.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, your opening hand was good, but you were going second. That's the issue. If you're going first and your hand is like a rain 3 of a kind or whatever, and you
Mm-hmm.
like double arsenal rain razors and an arrow, and you're sitting with 3 of a kind, you just take 13 damage off 4 cards. You go to 27. You probably do like 25 back to me, 30 back to me,
Right.
or whatever, right?
Right.
So
Right.
like
Right.
your opening hand was good. You just were going in the wrong. Like you were going second when you needed to go first to make that hand better, right?
Yeah. But
Um,
I guess my question is, if you boost these away, are you kind of screwed, or is this
yeah, oh,
really?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But
Yeah.
but that's only if like they're swinging 2025 consistently at you, right? Like you
Okay.
can always set this card up in Arsenal, and because of Twin Drive, which I'll explain a little bit later, it's easier and easier to get this card out with
Mm-hmm.
less stuff in your hands, right? So the rest of the equipment I'll just explain briefly. Foundry Heart, no
Yep.
explanation needed. I'm not running adaptive plating or something random like that.
Right.
Just you need the effect quite a bit. That extra resource I tend to use it almost every turn. It's just
Mm-hmm.
so good at providing like if that extra resource just gives you 5 more damage, it's
Yep.
just so good, right? So and if you can maximize your hand, I'm gonna do that a
Be a
lot.
lot of puns.
Maximize your hand. That's how you gotta do it. You'll notice the headpiece is not a mech card. It's a Crown of Providence. Crown of
Well, you've
Providence is
probably
mainly
got it in the
because
sideboard.
yeah, I do have it in the sideboard. But the Crown Providence is very good just because, other than its just stark power of being a 2 block in a class without a ton of armor, because your only armor other than this is the Foundry Heart, right? So having 4 armor is pretty useful for those 4 breakpoints, but also getting, more importantly, using this aggressively. So arsenaling a card, especially if you're going first, and you're able to mitigate kind of that disadvantage of having to go first as an aggro deck. Able to get 5, able to get around C if you have like a velocity in your
Mm-hmm.
arsenal or something important in your arsenal you want to keep in there. That's also quite good. So Providence is just your best all around for that. That's the
Yep.
equipment. I'll
Sounds
speak to
good.
the max velocity. It's max velocity specifically for 2 reasons. First of all, it helps you win the race. Obviously, it's a 2 for 10. Boosting three or more times is a lot easier with Twin Drive because Twin Drive will count towards
I'll
2 boosts.
bring that up here.
But we
Yeah.
could talk about Twin Drive. Yeah, this is one of the new cards that makes this deck a lot. Like if this deck did not have Twin Drive, I think it would struggle quite a bit more just on those games where you do need to close out 25 plus damage to like win the game kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, right? Because other than that, the deck is a little bit too fair in my opinion. So Max Velocity is one of those unfair cards, and Twin Drive just enables that even more.
Yep.
So boosting twice
Mm-hmm.
for Max Velocity's purposes, like kind of like the single best use case scenario for this card. I
Yeah.
think some of the other cards that came in for this deck in the new set and Bright Lights, all the ones that essentially have the on hit play an item, so Expedite and Medex,
Right. Right.
0 for 3, 1 for 4. I'm less excited about Expedite. I'm more excited about Medex just because it's a 1 for 4.
It's the break
So the
point.
one for
Yeah.
four, yeah, it's the break point, and you can just pitch this. You could pitch this Medex Max, get your hyperdriver crank. If you want to, you could Foundry Heart, and then you could swing Banksy if you want to do
Okay.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
to provide another on hit. So that's kind of like it fits well with your curve. Whereas the
Right.
0 for 3s are fine, and they're more important for things like magnetic shockwave, so the zero cost boosts and the ability to do that, which is magnetic shockwave, the other good use case for twin drive. But the 0 for 3 is kind of like help as much
Yeah.
as like a 0 to 60
I
helps
mean,
just
you
with the
might
on hit.
also need it eventually for maximum velocity if you don't have
Exactly.
twin drive.
Correct.
It
Correct.
helps
So
out.
that's yeah. So it fits that too. And you do have boom grenade. So like you literally could have that kind of use. You can actually do this if you want, and they don't necessarily. That's why I'm kind of considering another boom grade because I have so many expedites and mid-X and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The crankshafts are pretty standard. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
really going to talk too much about this. It
Yeah.
was in every hyper driver, any hyper driver deck. Anyways,
Yep.
Jumpstart. I'm running 3 reds and 2 yellows, so I kind of debated between one,
Oh,
two,
jumpstart.
and
Nice.
three. At its core, you usually have one hyperdriver out, so it generally sits as a 1 for 5, and a one
It's a
for five is
zipper
just a
hit, I
zipper
guess.
hit, and
Yeah.
zipper hit is great. Like the zipper hit's great. Running most of them, like I don't know, zipper hit's
Yeah.
great,
One
right? So
yellow is missing.
so I took out the yellow zipper, one of the yellow zipper hits for the jump starts because yellow jump starts could technically be a 0 for 4 if you have 2 hyperdrivers, which is possible with this deck,
I
especially
see.
when you're siding in your 3 hyperdrivers. So we do have hyperdrivers in the sideboard,
Okay.
and so when you side them in, it's infinitely more likely that you'll have two or more, mainly because that's like one of your win cons, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And they can
this
come out
card
pretty
coming
easily
in,
with MedX too. With
correct,
you know.
MedX, Expedite,
Yeah.
cards like that. So that's like another reason why Jumpstart is slightly better.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
but Zipper Hit is still like the king of consistency, essentially. Same thing with 0 to 60.
Yeah.
Throttle, same idea. It's a popper, 2 for 6, curves pretty nicely. Rev Up is another one of the new cards. I'm not running Soup Up. I am running Rev Up. So Soup Up is the rare. Soup Up is the one that is the red is like a 0 for 4. If it like breaks, like one of the things breaks, it can gain go again, something along those lines.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, if an item breaks, something like a boom grenade, it'll gain go again, or hyperdriver. Like if you boost and your hyperdriver gets
Okay.
destroyed,
Yeah.
you gain the resource. The soup up will gain go again, or +1, one of those two. I think it's
Right.
go again though. So rev up is different because first of all, it's a popper, which is pretty nice. Second of all, it's usually going to be a 2 for 6,
Yeah. And this
but
one does not
sometimes
get. Oh, it does get further discounted, right?
it does.
Yeah.
So if you have two, it costs 1, which I have done before. Coming in for like a 0 for 6 is pretty uncommon, but like
Mm-hmm.
I have done this as a 1 for 6 quite a few times, especially when you have extra hyperdrivers. But when you have the one hyperdriver, it coming in for a 2 for 6 is still fine. Especially when you can do things with Technical Foundry and really get a lot more
Mm-hmm.
resources and go a lot wider.
Yeah.
So Rev Up is has a higher potential for that like damage breaking multiplier kind of thing when
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
trying to push over the defenses because it requires a 2 card block to actually not leak any damage. So definitely like that 2 for 2, and we'll be kind of monitoring how well that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
6 T-bones. So I don't run yellow T-bone
Okay.
anymore because you used to run yellow T-bone, but now because of Twin Drive, I don't feel like I need
That
as
many
many procs.
zero boosts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and because I run Expedite instead as a 0 for 3 red,
Right.
right? And I don't feel like I need the yellow T-bones to help with the Mega Shockwave plan because I have Twin Drive. So 0 for 2 and yellow is very weak,
Yeah.
in my opinion. So
I
0 for 3
agree.
like kind of barely gets there. And what you can do now is you essentially pitch a blue. Well, you could T-bone, then pitch a blue for Twin Drive, had one floating, and then Foundry Heart to
Foundry.
Meganetic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then in that case, you'll strip, I believe,
Should be
3 equip.
two.
Well, one from the T-bone, and then Meganetic will grab another
Oh, I'm
two.
sorry. It should be
We'll,
three.
we'll, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
usually 3 is good enough. Usually you don't need 4.
Yeah. They've.
Um,
Yeah. But I guess most players would have blocked with one piece of equipment and then maybe blade braked, and then they have like the rest have
yeah,
to come in, right?
or they don't have enough useless pieces. Like they'll have one or
Right.
two that you can't target, but then they'll
Yeah.
run Tunic and another piece where they do target, kind of thing. And so you're still doing it pretty well, and that's
Yep.
that's not a that's not that difficult of a hand to get through. That's a regular 4 card. I don't need to like set up some crazy 5 card hand to get that
Yep.
through. So
It's pretty cool.
I feel like that's good enough. It helps a lot in the Lexi matchup. So breaking New Horizon as early as possible. Like
Mm.
if you happen to get 2 T-bones and a Twin Drive, you
Yep.
just take New Horizon. Like there's
Right.
nothing they can do about it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, So that's also quite good. Yeah, that's correct. T-bone, pitch, twin drive, foundry,
Mm-hmm.
and magnetic. That takes everything pretty much. So
Yep.
that is another piece.
Oh, I guess. Oh,
And
I guess the foundry would have broken the chain, right? So I guess you can't really foundry for it unless it's for the
yeah,
entire
no.
turn. Am I wrong? It's combat chain,
It's
right?
it's the combat chain, yeah. So you have to do it beforehand, but
Yeah. You have to have the
still fine.
resources for. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, because you have Hyper Driver usually, so that gets you your
that's a good
extra
point.
resource.
You can get there. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
get there with hyperdriver. Yeah.
yeah. You usually can just get there with Hyper Driver. I'm thinking more max velocity. You don't need
Right.
to chain doesn't matter, so you usually end up foundry harding for the max velocity.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Cool.
now are we
So that's
on
the
to the
main deck.
sideboard?
All right, we
That
are
is the main deck.
sideboard. I see. I see this thing. Oh no. I guess you've got
Yeah, I
like two
tried.
packages here.
Yeah, we tried to make this work earlier with like regular dash, and the issue was it was just way too slow,
Hmm.
and the decks had to like warp too much around this to make it good.
And you had to actually play hyperdrivers in the deck, whereas in this
Correct.
deck you don't have to. You can just slow roll it with Max's ability, and then it's very consistent.
Mm. Yeah, so you still run the reds because they're still good, and you can crank them out too, so you don't have to
Yeah.
just waste a turn, which is the key. That if you draw Hyperdriver, it's not just like sitting in your hand, and it's just like, oh, I have to keep another card to play this.
Yeah.
It's pretty. It was pretty bad when that happened.
Yeah.
But now the key is two things. Now, first you could crank. Second, you have a card called Hyper X3, which is the new equipment
Yeah. New
piece.
headpiece. Yeah.
Yeah, which means that now if it's in your hand, you play it and crank and it's fine. But even if you banish it, it goes under this thing, which is great because it just gives you more swings with your Nitro mechanoid. So essentially, what this does is that uh, if there's three or more, it's not really going to be super relevant here. But when you get like let's say one or two under this, and like you've maxed already, and then you Nitro mechanoid with the three you have on field, your mechanoid gets to attack two more times, which is super good because then on your high octane play, you just get that many more attacks if you're
Yeah.
able to boost enough, right? And
The
so
logic being that once you construct the mechanoid, all of the equipment you used keep
correct.
every card underneath them. So if you're putting hyperdrivers
Yes.
underneath this headpiece, that'll count
Yes.
towards the total number of charges towards your mechanoid.
Correct. Yes, it's quite good that way. It also has Battle Worn, which is infinitely better than the Visitronic, which is the only headpiece mech that you could run before.
That's true.
This has Battle Worn, which is super nice because you can't destroy it, which is great because destroying a piece of armor just negates Construct Nitro because
Yeah,
you
it's
don't have
pretty
something to put
rough.
under it.
Yeah.
Um, the Galvanic Bender is for Nitro, one Battle Ward, and then Visitronic if you need the AB. And High Octane only. I know it's weird seeing High Octane in the sideboard, but you
Yeah.
really don't. Your weapon doesn't do anything because your weapon has an attack once per turn. So High Octane doesn't really do anything
Yeah. It doesn't give
with
you
this
the,
deck.
the same benefit
Yeah.
in the least. I mean, compared to Dash, it's like night and day.
Yeah. Even Dash Ido with Symbiotic Shot is like you've had a couple items out, so you can keep like just hitting pistol for two
Yeah.
because you have like four charges on it, right? But in this particular case, it's just a three block non attack. It doesn't really do anything. So its purpose is solely to gain action points off a big boost turn once you have construct out. So the idea is that you're able to construct once you sit on construct, you hyperdrive, and then you essentially just wait for your high octane play, and that allows you to run through the game depending on how much damage they've taken already. So that's usually the strategy there.
Yeah.
The key with this deck, I guess, is that I will mention is when to bring in the Nitro package or not.
Right. Right.
And I'll say that the more you need the more you think that they will try to outrace you versus like the kind of deck that you want to bring into it matters quite a bit, right? Because they won't know once you reveal Maxx, they're not going to know whether you're Nitro or not. Like they're not going to know until they see Hyper X3 or they see Crown of Providence, right? They're not going to know. So the idea is that you'll want to assume that they're going to just play their game plan and not change towards your game plan. So in that end, I guess Lexi construct is too slow, right? So you still do need time. You still need a couple turns
Yeah.
to get out construct. Like you can get this thing out turn 3, turn 4, but sometimes against a deck like a hyper aggressive deck like Lexi is just not really feasible. In some cases, so you just run boost regular because you have Mega plan against them. You could
Hmm.
run max velocity into them, so you could still race them fairly well and get pretty nice value. And you can try to out snowball them. So it's just a bit of a race in that case. Um, for Dromai, it's a little bit more tricky because Dromai can Tumultai, and
Hmm.
that's bad
A
because
little bad.
yeah, I think Tumultai just kind of kind of destroys construct plan
Just gotta
because
build it before they get Tomultai.
yeah, because the nice thing about this is like yeah, all of this is battle worn. That's fine,
Right.
but Tumultai just says
Literally just
put
snipes
minus
an equip.
yeah -1 counter and just take your stuff as long as it's got 0 or less, right? So
Hmm.
that plan is too risky in my view. So you just kind of have to go boost and hope they don't fatigue you. And the way to do that is to hit max velocities. If you can hit 2+ max velocities, you'll be fine. You do have a fair amount of poppers, not a ridiculous amount, but you do have a fair amount of
I
poppers.
think it was like
And if you
6 or 9. It was probably like 9, right? 3 throttle, 3 rev up, and 3 max
yeah,
velocity.
yeah, you don't really want to
You
be
don't want to
velocity
be
popping,
popping. Yeah,
but
absolutely. Yeah. So
yeah,
6 realistically.
yeah, you generally the game plan to Dromite is ignore the bad dragons. You don't really have time to
Right.
hit the bad dragons. You really just want to be hitting things like Chromai,
Maybe
Mirror Guy,
Kyloria.
Kyloria.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chromai, Mirror Guy, Kyloria. Mirror Guy's a little annoying because Banksy doesn't kill it. However, Mirror Guy just sets up a lot of other crap that you have to deal with, right? Now,
Kyloria
the
can steal hyperdrivers, right?
Kyloria can steal hyperdrives. Kyloria can steal boom grenade.
Yeah, boom.
It's possible. I don't know why they
Yeah.
would want it, but
Yeah, at
it
least
technically
you can't
can
have it.
steal
That's
it.
why.
Yeah, exactly. But it generally dies if you don't hit with it that particular time, right? Because you usually play it and then it's just like whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it can steal the hyperdrivers. But the key is that you want to overwhelm them with damage. That's the key part for that matchup. I will say the Bravo matchup definitely you want to go construct mechanoid. They unless they like completely roll you with
Yeah.
like stupid luck, which is nothing you could do anyways. You can do a pretty good job at setting up for construct. You have a decent chunk of armor. Like you're not super tanky, but you're not terrible. All your cards block for 3, so it's really a matter of you don't have to do anything special other than get the hyperdrivers out, try to get a couple of them and set up for a big high octane, and that should be
Yeah.
good enough because Nitro has overpower. Against
Hmm.
Azalea, I would also go construct. Azalea is a little bit tricky. You could try to go aggro. The problem is that she just has Red in the Ledger.
Hmm.
So if she hits you with Red in the Ledger, your aggro plan is like, oh, I guess I'll just
Yeah.
hit you for 6, right? But if you're able to get a nice construct off, you can just kind of overwhelm her. And the key is that you'll generally be blocking a lot with like full hand, which is fine if you want to prevent, big damage. But if she kind of spikes big dominates, just kind of wait until she has try to build your board with hyperdrivers and wait until there's an opening to actually construct, get one in the
Mm.
arsenal. Like, she really doesn't have good arsenal targets, as in like she doesn't usually run stuff like CNC. I think, unless that's changed.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think I had like
your
one
arsenal needs to-
copy in my deck, but I don't actually
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I would save armor for things like sedation shot, especially if you have like construct, because you really don't want to be having to cycle that back,
Yeah.
and just kind of set that up. Are there any other crazy ass matchups?
No.
Katsu
Yeah,
could
I guess
probably
Katsu.
aggro. I don't think I would try to construct.
Construct.
I don't want to run the yeah. I don't necessarily want to run the hyperdrivers. Period, because they're items into a deck that you might not need to block a lot.
Yeah.
I also know that Katsu just doesn't have a ton of armor either. So I would prefer to try to like boost down, just outrace, because Katsu can have some really awkward hands, whereas a
Hmm.
lot of the time my hands are actually pretty reasonable. There's a chance they might try to like fatigue you out. So if that's the case, if you think that they're trying to do that, they have a lot of 3 blocks, but they also still have 2 blocks like surging. I would just set up a max velocity and try to like punch through that way because they don't really
Yeah.
have armor to speak of. So because they're running 2 block aggressive cards, they can't always have like full blocking hands, and there will be hands that they want to keep, especially if they're running Artivore. There will be
Hmm.
hands that eventually they just don't block very well. So I would just say keep running at them and don't worry really about deck. Like I don't think you'll fatigue out, even if they're trying it, unless they're really really committed and have a deck
Yeah.
specifically built like Flick Flack
All
and stuff
flick
like that.
flacks. Yeah.
Yeah, Rainbow Flicks. I think that's it. I don't think there's any other matchups that I really think is worth
Hmm.
talking about right now that will come up. So that is the deck and kind of a blueprint of how the deck works and what kind of package you want to bring into different matchups. If you like this kind of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any notes or anything that's succeeded for you in your Max adventure, or you're bringing Max to the ProQuest season or the calling or such, let us know. Let us know why. And with that, from wherever you are in the world, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.